Hello and welcome to episode 14 of Rubbish Talk podcast with me, Alistair Meldrum.
And me, Jane Bond.
And today we're going to be talking to a former employee of Albion Environmental, a lady called Gail Martin. And Gail Martin is a member and Centre Engagement Manager at the Chartered Institution of Waste Management. So Gail has the pleasure of talking to lots of waste management people around, it used to be around Scotland, now around the whole of the UK. So before we get on to that, the usual, a bit of chat between myself and Jane in terms of what's happening in the big bad world of waste management.
Yeah, that's me to start. So we've been looking at the litter strategy. The Scottish Government produced a national litter and fly tipping strategy, and I've been looking at it, and what I hadn't realised is at least £60 million of public money is spent annually to clean up all that fly tipping waste. So what they're trying to do is put a 6-year strategy through, which includes quite a lot of focus on like education, trying to I suppose educate people in terms of this is what they should be doing, this is the impact on the environment. There's also there's quite a few people involved in this as well. As a Scottish Environment Protection Agency, there is the Keep Scotland Beautiful, Zero Waste Scotland, and there's also the Loch Lomond parks as well. So I think it's trying to focus on where to actually go to get the information, but also where to go to report it. So there's going to be a national online litter hub and an action to identify, target and stop fly tippers, so that there's somewhere to record and identify what's happening, and support for private landowners dealing with fly tipping, because a lot of the problem is guys come fly tip and then it's the owner of the land that is ending up with the liability and the issue and the cost. So it's trying to get some more powers to tackle the littering from vehicles and seizing vehicles in fly tipping offences. So there's kind of two things there. One's about fly tipping and one's about litter. So there's also increases in penalty notices for fly tipping. I don't know, the issue always with fly tipping is catching somebody and then actually taking that enforcement action. What I couldn't see, and I probably haven't done enough kind of research, is how many people are getting caught for fly tipping, how many people do get caught for littering in the street and all that sort of stuff. So it would be interesting. There is supposed to be new legislative powers as well, for fixed penalty notices and that kind of thing. So hopefully there's no point having a strategy if you can't enforce it and implement it. So we'll see what happens. There's also an implementation plan with it, which, you know, it's quite nice. It's only 5 pages long, so everybody can look at it.
That's what I was going to say, Jane. The easy bit of the work has been done in terms of posting the strategy. The hard bit is actually the implementation, getting the councils, SEPA, the fiscal, everybody working together to actually make this happen. Because I think if you actually, you know, from what I know about this subject, if you look at the number of fines and the number for dealing with litter or fly tipping is tiny. It's probably less than tens for every local authority in the country. So we've been pretty poor at, you know, actually implementing some of the existing stuff we've got. But I think the challenge with that is who's actually responsible, who's got the resource, who's got the budget to do it. Potentially councils are the ones that get the brunt of it, but then sometimes it's SEPA that needs to enforce it and so on, and then they need to be backed up with the fiscal. So it's interesting it's been issued. It's down to, we need to watch and see. And I think if anybody wants a bit of background about the history of litter and street cleansing, episode 11 that we did with George Niblock, he's got some pretty interesting views about it, and I'm sure he'd have pretty interesting views of the strategy that's just been issued.
I'm sure he would, actually. Just talking about roles and responsibilities, one of the implementation key is support key stakeholders to review guidance on roles and responsibilities of Scottish Environment Protection Agents, local authorities, national parks and Police Scotland in investigating and enforcing fly tipping offences. I think often it kind of falls between two stools, perhaps, or like you say, there's not enough resources to investigate all this. And what I quite like is tackling litter from vehicles and being able to actually tackle the owner of the vehicle, because there's so often when you see, you know, all the litter at the side of the roads. It's been thrown out of people's cars in the majority of cases. So actually being able to do something about that would be good.
Well, I think the big change, the interesting change, is allowing the owner of the vehicle to be fined for littering, which is really positive, because I know South Ayrshire Council have had success going to McDonald's with, for example, they found a receipt and some fly tip rubbish, or some McDonald's rubbish, if you like, and they have gone to McDonald's and found the registration number and then put a fixed penalty notice on it. So I think that things like that would have a big impact if we started doing that across the country. Anyway, moving on, one of the things I spotted it was actually on LinkedIn, an organisation called Material Focus. We've talked about them before. They do a huge amount of work on waste electrical equipment, and they've done a massive amount of work in terms of the disposable vapes we've talked about. And just a wee bit of a shout out for Laura Young, who is based over in Dundee, and she's got a bit of a campaign running to try and get local authorities to ban vapes. But every time I turn on the TV, I seem to see Laura Young appearing, at some, House of Commons committee or Scottish Government committee, giving out the message about how bad these disposable vapes are for both the environment and for health. So well done to Laura. But the one that Material Focus put out today, which I thought was really interesting, and I can think of a number of items that sit in my house. So they reckon that every house in the country, they call it the campaign Fad Tech. So all these kitchen appliances that we buy, the ice cream maker, the popcorn maker, the smoothie maker, they get bought at Christmas time and then get abandoned in the cupboard. And they reckon there's something like 18 million of these appliances gathering dust in people's households, so two per household. And what they've come up with is a bit of a stat saying they estimate there's 2.4 million of these sitting in people's houses, and that could actually be made into 2.1 million defibrillators. I knew I wasn't going to be able to say that, Jen.
Yeah, you did
you know
practice
what I mean?
a bit beforehand.
These heart start machines you get. So we'll put a link on the show notes to Material Focus. If you don't follow them, they do produce some pretty interesting stuff.
I've definitely got a popcorn maker in my cupboard, which isn't doing anything. But I tell you what, the best thing I've ever bought is a air fryer. Just adding that in. That's been used. That's not a fad tech at the moment in my house.
So as long as you've got one you're using,
Yes, absolutely. But you can have the popcorn maker.
Anyway, I've been banging on, there's a couple of podcasts. I know, obviously you listen to this podcast first, but there's been a couple of podcasts I've been listening to recently that I found quite fascinating. The first was, I think, called Donut Economics, and that was presented by Kate Rayworth. Now, she's got this theory, and the podcast I listened to, she has done other ones, but the one I listened to was Leading, which is by Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, and they interviewed her. And the whole theory of donut economics is that, like, at the moment, most countries look for continuous growth. So for their economy to continue to prosper, they look for continuous growth. And her argument is that's totally unsustainable. And if you think about it from an environmental point of view, she's probably right. So if you think of a conventional donut, what she's saying is we should have as little as possible in the centre of the donut, because that's, where all the problems are. That's people with, no housing, no money. But then the other side of the coin is we should have a limit to how far the external boundary of the donut goes, because that's unsustainable growth. And what she's saying is the bit in the middle is where we should be able to prosper. That's probably a very bad description. So if you actually want to find out more, have a listen to what she's talking about. And again, we'll put the link up on the show notes. The next one I was listening to was a thing called Basis, and they are an organisation to try and improve sustainability in sport. And they had a bit of an awards night, and they had some pretty interesting stuff on. Well, one of the things that sort of fascinated me is if you play tennis or you're a cyclist, you might have a carbon fiber bike, but at the moment there's no real way of recovering and recycling that. But they've actually worked out, one of the competition winners had worked out a way of breaking down a tennis racket and making it back into a tennis racket eventually, which is, it's great to hear. But some of the other things they looked at is thinking about how big clubs can get their fans, can influence behaviours in the fans and get them being more sustainable. So one of the clubs, for example, the only food they sell at the ground is vegetarian. Or if they do sell vegetarian food, they're putting the vegetarian choice at the top of the menu and looking at try to change behaviours. And I think, Jane, you had some experience, had some thoughts on recent festivals and camping equipment. And
I know I was watching Glastonbury on the telly the last weekend, and was thinking, well, what happens to everything? Because I think, based on what I've been looking at, they've got quite a, sustainability seems to be part of their sort of ethos at the Worthy Farm. And I was looking online, and it did say since 2019, they obviously haven't updated it since, but since 2019, over 99% of all tents have been taken home after each festival. I'm kind of thinking, well, that's 99%, but that's still 1%. I mean, why can't people take tents with them? It's like, I'll buy a tent, I'll take it to a festival, and I'll just leave it there. So again, it sounds great, 99%, but there's a lot of people and a lot of tents at Glastonbury. So, if we can, and it's around education, isn't it? But again, they're looking at single-use plastic drinks bottles have not been available to purchase at the festival, so it's all, multi-use ones. The sale of disposable vapes are also banned on site.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, and all crisps are sold in compostable packaging. So so you can see that things are actually, they're thinking about all these things. Disposable single serving sachets are not supplied or available anywhere on site, so they're actually thinking about it. And we've got I was also looking at Transmit as well, and wondering, because we've got Transmit in Glasgow at the weekend, and what sort of sustainability things they've got up. But I couldn't see any specific numbers, but they said they're proud signatories of the Green National Sustainability Charter and proud members of this, that and the other. And they are talking about the biggest goal this year is to compost as much waste as possible. So they'll have general recycling waste and cups and composting, which is great, because the problem with composting and cups, there's so many cups and composting stuff there everywhere. I guess McDonald's can make composting containers, but it's actually putting them in the right bins in the end that's the important bit. So hopefully things can improve. It'll be interesting to see what Glasgow Green looks like at the end of the weekend.
I think it is really interesting how big clubs, sports events, musical events, they can play a big part in influencing people, but it's how are they doing it properly? Are they thinking about, a waste contractor getting 50,000 cups from a festival, putting it through a composting system? To be honest, they'll probably not compost very well without other waste. I think particularly young people are more aware of these things in terms of, and I think some companies are realising that, so they're making sure their marketing covers it. But if anybody is interested in sort of climate change, and we all should be, there's a guy called Howard Dryden, who I've known for, not briefly, but I know him as a sort of colleague through work, LinkedIn, and he does a huge amount on the state of the seas and the oceans and how that is, everybody's sort of missing the point. We're all focusing on carbon dioxide, and his point is that we need to make sure we're managing the seas and oceans. And some of the stuff he posts up is actually pretty terrifying. I read a post the other day, and I thought I was actually quite depressed about it afterwards, because it was just, how do we actually turn this around? So again, we'll put the link up to Howard Dryden and some of the work he's been doing. Enough chat. A wee bit of Albion news in terms of the podcast. We're delighted. We're continuing to grow. It's well into the four figures now. We do have a bit of a under-presence of female listeners. We're only 39.5% female. The males are streaming ahead at 60.5%. Our main peak is 45 to 59-year-olds. And saying that, we have had a wee bit of a peak recently. There's been a wee increase on the 28 to 34-year-olds. So there you go. So we'll keep working that. We'll keep working.
So we want females and younger people to listen.
I know for a fact we do have some younger listeners. Delighted if you could share the podcast with your pals and get them to listen. Or if somebody's desperate to come on the podcast or share their views about it, then quite happy to, contact us through our social media.
But we're still interested in getting some holiday waste management stuff, aren't we? It's still holiday season. Come on, people, send us some photos, your holiday snaps of waste management, good or bad, in other countries. It'd be really interesting.
Well, you could probably extend that to good or bad practice at festivals, Jane.
Yeah,
festivals
totally,
and
absolutely.
sports matches. There we go. I think that's us. What we'd like to do now is basically hand over to our interview with Gail Martin from Chartered Institute of Waste Management.
Hi, Gail. It's nice to see you. I haven't seen you for a while.
Hi, Jane. How are you?
Not too bad. We've got Gail Martin here with us, member and Centre Engagement Manager at CIWM. I guess the first thing, Gail, is can you tell us who you currently work for and a bit of background about the organisation? It'd be interesting to hear all about CIWM.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I work for CIWM, which is a professional body. It's a chartered institution, and we are there to represent those that work within the waste and resource sector. CIWM a few years ago merged with, people will know, WAMATAB, which is an awarding body for vocational qualifications, which you yourself at Albion deliver. And we sort of merged together. So between that part, we now have CIWM WAMATAB, and we have CIWM, and we're there to support the sector from operational level through to sort of senior management, CEO level, through our membership grades and qualifications.
It's interesting. I've been a member of CIWM, gosh, I think it's early 1990s. So it's definitely changed and grown since then. So it's interesting to see that happening and things moving forward. What about your role as a member and centre engagement manager? What's your day-to-day and overall responsibilities, Gail?
So my role's kind of split into as member centre engagement manager, which they do meet in the middle, but it's really sort of supporting our members, so trying to encourage people to join CIWM as a member. But I also work very closely with our centres, where we have 10 regional centres throughout the UK and Ireland, and they're made up of volunteers, and they run events in their regions for members. So it's supporting our volunteers and being that liaison between the centres and CIWM head office. And a large part of my job is running the Chartered Upgrade programme. So I support candidates, whether that be in group sessions or one-to-one, to encourage them to apply to become chartered and sort of help them navigate the process.
Yeah, it's quite good because getting members and getting people to keep engaging in this day and age with all the financial pressures for people and companies, it might be quite a challenge as well.
Yeah, it can be. I think we adapted very quickly when the pandemic hit, as did every business. We're forced to conduct things online, and for us it's been really successful in terms that we can still deliver those technical messages through our webinars. We launched a platform called CIWM Connect, which is a member-only platform, and that's a great way for our members to connect with each other, because we realised that we were all sort of in our bubbles working from home, and GDPR can be a barrier because we can't share contact details, and some of our members weren't perhaps getting out at events to speak to people, or they weren't seeing people. So that's a really good platform for connecting. It can be used for individual messages, so you can message people privately, or if you've got a query, it might be, how do I deal with a particular waste stream? What's the regulations around this? You can post that on there, and it's really great to see other members coming forward and sharing that knowledge and experience. We're still at a place where we are going back to face-to-face events. We do have some hybrid events. Here in Scotland, I think you both attended the Scotland Centre AGM and meeting, which was really good. And we do have some social events as well. But it is still quite difficult, I find, for myself, previously having held the role here in Scotland, where I was sort of out and about. I tend to be more desk-based now because I'm dealing more on a national level, but that engagement's still there. Teams and Zoom are great. They're my tools, and no 2 days are the same.
I think it's really good in Scotland still, you know, like you say, that meeting the AGM last, it was only a few months ago, and that was absolutely brilliant, you know, actually being able to go in person and meet people again and have that discussion, and the amount of people there was really good as well. And again, the sort of annual event, I think it's in Perth again, isn't it? You know, for that as well, the annual Scottish event as well, that's really good.
Yeah, so we've got the Scottish Resource Conference happening in October in Perth, 3rd and 4th of October, which is a really good event because it actually brings people in from beyond the core role of waste. So a lot of people that are maybe interested in design, circular economy, you know, sort of innovative ideas as well, and finding the balance between that and, you know, what you would call traditional sort of waste management of people that are dealing with different policies that are coming through at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's what we've been saying throughout, is like waste management, there's so many different sides to it. And, you know, we tend to look at the sort of downstream bit, but it's all the upstream bit that's the most important for when we're getting into the circular economy side. So, yeah, it gives a platform and a forum for all people to meet and find out what everybody's trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
Anyway, back to you.
Gail, I'm sure we can put a link to the Scotland conference on the show notes as well. That might be a good idea if people are interested. But I was going to go a bit off topic and off script, hopefully not putting you in the spot too much. But could you maybe explain some of the different membership levels? Because I think we've got graduate all the way through to chartered and so on. And I think some are, if I remember correctly, some are free.
Yes, so we'll start with student, and actually, Alistair, that would be fantastic if you could add the link to the Scottish Resource Conference. But with membership, we start with student membership, which is a free of charge membership grade, and that's available to anyone that is in full-time education or anyone that is undertaking one of the CIWM qualifications. We offer that. We actually recently launched an affiliate grade, which is for our learners. So we do give all our learners automatically, when they're registering for the vocational qualifications, free membership for 2 years. So that's there to support people that are in that sort of learning phase or coming into the industry. The next level that we have is a general sort of affiliate grade, and that's for people, it's for anyone actually. It's not one of our professional grades, so it's not assessed. It's for anyone that has an interest in the waste and resources industry. And simply to join, you visit our website, you populate your information and you join. As soon as you've paid your fees, you join up, and that opens up a whole window for you to access all the membership benefits for learning and development and networking, etc. And then we move on to our professional grades. And we recently launched a new grade, which is technical grade. So technical grade sits alongside our associate grade. They are slightly different insofar as technical grade is mainly aimed at those people that are operational. And the entry criteria for that would be CIWM WAMITAB level 4 qualification or similar qualification, where you've already demonstrated what you've done through achieving that qualification. So we just look for that certificate and your CV, and you can join as a technical member and use the post-nominals after your name. Associate, which sits at the same level, is more geared towards perhaps consultants. They're not operational, but they have that knowledge in the sector. And the entry criteria for that is either you have no experience and you have a degree, so it's a sort of graduate level, or you have 2 years work experience within the sector and you can apply for that level. And then we move through to chartered, which is there's lots of different routes into chartered, and I won't go through absolutely all of them, but the majority of people that come through chartered either have 4 years work experience with a degree or 5 years work experience with no degree. And there is a whole sort of process there that we provide workshops, drop-in sessions. We have 7 chartered competencies that you need to demonstrate how you meet those through a paper-based, or I say paper-based, it's online, but through a written application, which is then assessed, and successful candidates at that point are then put forward to online panel interview. We call it an interview, but really it's a professional discussion, a bit like what we're doing today actually, and it's just really sort of quizzing and digging a little bit deeper into that application that you've submitted, that you meet those competencies. And then lastly, we have our fellow membership, which you are, Alistair. We have our fellowship, and that's, again, you need to be chartered to be a fellow. We do have a direct entry route now, but for those people that have maybe never tapped into CIWM before, but they absolutely should be members, they should be chartered. And if they've got that significant experience, which is a minimum of 7 years if you're chartered or 11 years if you're not, you can go straight into applying for fellowship, and it's a combined application where essentially you're becoming chartered and fellow at the same time.
I've got 30 years experience, Gail. Can I take that box?
You can absolutely. So you apply. We run our sessions. I should say we run our chartered and fellow sessions quarterly each year. So there's lots of windows of opportunity. And now that we've discussed this, you'll be on my radar, Jane. And when you get on my radar, you don't get back off.
There you go.
Gosh, I've got no excuses, have I? Right, Gail.
No escape now. No escape
Absolutely.
now. Well, there you go. I think that's been a good sales pitch for CIWM, but it's good to know there's support out for people across the sector. And one thing I would recommend is definitely any students that are interested in waste or doing environmental degrees, it's an ideal opportunity to find out much more about the sector. You know, it doesn't apply to students, but students, learners, whoever's undertaking courses, is a great opportunity to take up and be involved in. And I think both myself and Jane would agree, we've both been involved with CIWM for most of our career, and it has helped and influenced what we do. And I think a lot of that is partly the network of people you build up through the institute, which is really important. So it's not necessarily what you know, but who you know that knows something you need.
Absolutely.
That's important. So
I should say, just as an example on that, Alistair, we had a lady that I recruited many years ago, who is a student member, who wrote a dissertation on energy from waste, and we gave her a link in to do a bit of a spot at the Scottish Resource Conference, and onwards from that she was offered a job actually for a consultancy, and she's still with CIWM. So any students out there looking to think, where do I go, how do I get help with this, it can be really invaluable, that networking. You're getting the potential to meet future employers, and it costs you nothing, just your time.
That leads us very nicely into the next question, Gail. What brought you into the world of waste management?
Okay. So I didn't, probably like a lot of people in the sector, I didn't start out to come into waste management. It wasn't an area that I'd ever thought of. My background was sort of in marketing and media. But I took a contract role to cover maternity leave for a lady who was covering the Regional Development Officer for Scotland, and loved it so much, and the contract came to an end, and Alistair, you kindly offered me a position, so I worked with Albion for about 3 years, I think it was, over 3 years.
I was trying to remember the other day how long it was.
Which I thoroughly enjoyed. I worked with your sort of modern apprenticeships and through Skills Development Scotland, and also with your training courses as well. And then just really sort of loved the industry, and moved back over into CIWM when the role became available back again as Scotland Regional Development Officer, which subsequently changed to Membership Development Executive, and now where I am now is Member and Centre Engagement Manager. But I do remember, and I won't name the person, but if he listens to this, he'll know exactly who he is. One of the first times when I first started, I was tasked with going into Zero Waste Scotland, and I was in the boardroom and someone said, why, what made you come in? I said, oh, I'm kind of here, I'm covering a contract, I won't be here very long. And they said, no, when you get into this sector, you never leave. And here I am, all these years on, still here. So I thought, oh, I'll be gone. I won't be here for that long, but I am. I love it. I love the sector. Everyone's so helpful. The networking, it's a community. And I often say as well, particularly here in Scotland, it's like a village, this sector. Everybody knows everybody, and you know who to contact for anything you need.
And I'm going to guess that was Charlie Devine that said that to you.
Well, I'm not committing. I'm not committing.
There you go. So in terms of what's been your favourite role, your favourite project, or maybe you're in your favourite role at the moment?
I think I am in my favourite role at the moment. I get a real buzz and real job satisfaction from helping candidates to become chartered. And I look at people, I'm dealing with people where they think that they're not ready to become chartered, and actually when you start speaking with them, you realise that they absolutely are. They just need that little push and that little bit of confidence or whatever it may be. And I really, really enjoy working with them through their journey, having these one-to-one sessions, helping them, giving them hints, tips and advice, and the sort of gratitude that they have at the other end of it when they get through is what drives me. But I also really, really love working with our volunteers, our centres, because these are the people, they're members of CIWM, they are the backbone of CIWM. They give up their personal time to help CIWM, its members and the whole community. And, I'm sort of in awe of what they do, the time and the commitment. So I really enjoy that. I love helping other people.
That sounds like a good role. Sounds like you're enjoying it. And what you're trying to achieve out of that is obviously coordination, communication, all that kind of side of it, isn't it, really?
It is. And every day is different. You sort of set off the day thinking, right, I'm going to do, and I'm sure that it's like this in a lot of people's jobs. You set off the day thinking I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and it ends up being A, B, and C. So it's just very varied, sort of jumping from one thing to another. But the core part of what I do, I really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, and you get to see a real wide range of people, employees, and sort of the sector as a whole, don't you? You see all sorts of it, every bit of it, really, in your role.
I absolutely do, and different levels of people that I'm working with, at different stages in their career, and from completely different sort of subsectors as well within the sector, because it's so varied. I think a lot of people seem to think, waste management is a sort of dirty thing and it's collecting bins, but it's so much more than that. We've got engineers, we have project managers. What was originally a traditional waste manager's job has changed vastly. They're responsible for procurement, contract management, having to know policy and legislation. There's so many different roles right through to academia and even the legal side of it. So it's great to actually speak to different people who've got so many different backgrounds.
And I suppose in terms of that, you're sort of looking at your opinions and habits outside the workplace. So when you go home, I guess do you champion your work day? Do you champion waste management, sustainability, recycling when you get home? Is that, and with all your friends? Do they get us fed up with you?
Yes, yes,
fed
they
up with
do.
you to do with me.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of got to that point that the family say, oh no, not again. Or if something comes on the television that remotely covers anything, any buzzwords, it's mum, shut up before you say anything. But I absolutely do. My whole lifestyle since being in this sector has changed. I'm a very, very strong advocate of reducing waste. I think recycling, yes, but actually if we can be using reuse things such as bottles, it's all very well recycling your plastic bottles, but actually why buy them in the first place? Let's use a cup that we can refill. So that sort of principle, and food waste is a huge bugbear of mine. So I absolutely do practice them, and I'm the person years ago at kids' parties that people would get embarrassed with because they would have paper plates with all these little mini sausage rolls and everything that the kids didn't eat, and they put them in a black bin bag. And I went through and segregated them. And people were like, for goodness sake, what are you doing? But you've got to practice what you preach.
I thought you were going to say there, I got all the sausages and started eating them.
Well,
once the kids got older and ate all their dinner, that was the amount of weight I lost was amazing.
I bet your kids love going to the party with you.
Oh yes, it was, Mum, you're an embarrassment. Stop.
But no, that stuff is so important to us, isn't it? So, you know, and I think now people are much more aware of it, and
yeah,
you know, that sort of thing is not uncommon where people would segregate material like that. So it should just be part of the norm. It's not that hard to do, really, is it? It's not that difficult. Anyway, all about work. How do you get away from work? How do you relax? You mentioned kids who are a bit older than kids now, if I remember
yes,
correctly.
they absolutely are. They're adult, grown-up adults, but they're temporarily back at home at the moment. But
I've got a couple like that as well that sort of seem to keep reappearing.
Yeah, it's like a yo-yo, they keep coming back. I am a bit of a home bird. I enjoy spending lots of time with the family. We do a lot together as a family, whether that be walking or eating out. I love my garden. I love spending time in the garden. I'm not very good at it, but I do try. And it's been great with this lovely weather that we've been getting recently to actually sit and enjoy the garden rather than working in it. I also enjoy, I just enjoy eating out. I enjoy going my summer holidays. Love cats, absolutely obsessed by cats. Not everybody, I'm probably not going to be popular with everyone. You're either a dog person or cat person. I love animals, but I love my cats.
Have you got a cat?
I have got rescue cat, yeah.
Yeah, there was, I don't know if you noticed, there was a bit of a trend of the picture that was put up with the podcast was guests plus their dogs. So
oh, okay.
a photograph of you and your cat would work quite well if you.
Well, trying to get a hold of my cat is easier said than done.
Right,
He's a little bit feral, shall we say. But yeah, he's the rescue kitten that I was never going to have after all my other cats sort of passed, and went to the centre to hand back, again in the spirit of reuse, to hand back the cat bedding and the bowls, and came back with all said equipment plus a kitten. So yeah, I think they saw me coming at that one.
Well, you were talking about holiday. We've put a bit of a shout out for good and bad waste management practice from holidays. So we're in the search for what's good and what's bad about the waste management when people go on holidays. So this gives you full permission to start taking photographs of bins and all sorts when you go on holiday.
I definitely do that, Alistair, I have to say. I do. And some of the places that I've been to recently have actually got really quite good segregation in the Canary Islands, and they do a big thing. You know, I remember sort of in Lanzarote once coming off the plane, and the first thing I saw was this sort of mural that was made up with plastics from the ocean, and they're really good on the sort of environment side of things, like ocean plastics, beach cleans, and just generally their sort of conservation as well, particularly the scarcity of water. And so, yeah, that's quite interesting. But I've got full permission now, Alistair, thank you,
Yep, there
because
you go.
my husband hates it when I'm sort of standing with my mobile phone taking photos of bins and bin trucks.
Brilliant,
I'm the
brilliant.
real waste nerd.
That's
Yeah,
what that's what we like to hear.
yeah, I think we're all waste nerds, isn't it? It's quite sad. Alistair's taking photos of creep bins, and I'm looking at things in Malta. It's like, crikey, you can't get away from it, can you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's next for you in your career, Gail?
Oh, so I recently became chartered after years of putting it off and then feeling, I'm encouraging other people to do this. I really ought to do this myself. So I feel as though I've kind of ticked that box. I think I will continue doing as is at the moment. Obviously, as being chartered, I commit to CPD each year, so I'm constantly learning things each day. And maybe, who knows, in the future I might consider applying for fellow years down the line, or chartered environmentalist, and staying certainly within the sector doing what I do, because I enjoy it so much.
So no escape from the waste sector then, eh?
No, I'm here for the duration.
No, you didn't put her off, Alistair, when she came to work for Albion.
Oh,
No, I really enjoyed my job in Albion. It was, the only thing was for me where I live in South Lanarkshire and going to Ayr, but fortunately I was able to work from home and sort of split the week up, and I did only work part-time, but it was great coming down to the coast as well though. But no, I enjoyed working with the sort of modern apprentice and the Skills Development Scotland contract. Again, sort of probably where I got my interest actually in this sort of qualifications, professional development and upskilling.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's good to actually see the youngsters coming through and learning.
I was in a call yesterday about this whole very subject, about the fact that the demographic of the waste management sector, which is not that different to other sectors, but the whole demographic, everybody's in their 50s and 60s, and we've really got a ticking time bomb in terms of, in 10 years' time when they all retire, are we actually going to have enough people to collect the bins, do the waste process, and do all the rest? And there appears to be nobody having a look at that as an overall strategy. I know CIWM has done a lot of work in this, but having a look at it in terms of what do we need to do? How do we engage the colleges to get people into the sector? And we're one industry. The energy industry's got exactly the same issue, and it's going to be a huge problem.
Yeah, it is. We've got an aging workforce, and I think a lot of people don't aspire to, come into waste management, particularly maybe even at that sort of operational level where you're sort of frontline staff.
Yeah.
And it definitely does need to be addressed. CIWM have done quite a lot of work, around sort of green skills and looking at, schools and educating, sort of best practice recycling and all that sort of thing. But it's how do you encourage people to come into the sector? Because if we don't do something, you're absolutely right, Alistair, who is going to do it in 10 years' time?
Is there one, going on from that, is there one fact you would like to share from your job or your sector which you think people might not know, and you think it might, if you tell them that, they might think, oh, that industry's fantastic, let's get into it. Is there one thing that you would actually let people know about?
I think that's probably goes back to something I said earlier around the variety of roles within the sector. Try not to think of it as you put your waste in the bin and that's it and forget about it. It's about looking at even going right back to the design, creating things that are sustainable, that fit into that circular economy, which is keeping it in the loop and keeping, things going, and look beyond, all these sort of different opportunities that are there in the sector. Even if you want to go into sort of legal sense, for example, or looking at academia, there's just so much environmentally, and I think we need to look at the waste sector or waste and resource sector as almost environmental, because it has such a huge impact. You know, from putting something in your bin and you might think nothing of it, you've then got, if you think about it, that carbon footprint of, you know, them coming to collect the bin, taking it away, processing the waste. Anyone that's interested in the environment should seriously look at the waste sector, because there's so many things that we can do to improve and actually make the waste sector less of a carbon footprint and help the world as a whole. If we're really going to tackle climate emergency, it kind of starts a lot with waste, the manufacturing process through to the product that's not sustainable, and then the waste sector pick it up at the end of the line.
Absolutely, that's the whole idea for this podcast, Gail, to try and get out there and educate people that, you know, as I call it, the magic bin fairy comes along the back lane and lifts the waste that magically disappears, and the reality is it doesn't. So there we go. Anyway, we always ask our guest for one acronym or a bit of industry jargon that they either love or hate or want to add on to our list.
Oh, right. Well, I had a bit of a think about this because I got the questions in advance, but actually I have a favourite one. Probably not for the reasons it should be favourite, but
that's fine. I accept any reason.
Okay, so it's wee pop. And the reason I like wee pop is because when I first heard it, it reminded me of the Tweenies or some sort of breakfast cereal. But actually, what it actually stands for is waste electrical and electronic equipment, and it's persistent organic pollutants. And that's about anything that's electrical or electrical components, and the chemical makeup of it can cause pollutants into the environment. But I think wee pops sounds much better.
I think with all, absolutely, and I think with all the things that are going on in the industry with pops, I think the public may actually know about that term fairly soon as well, because it's a not so much a growing problem, but in terms of how we're going to have to deal with it, it's going to become a huge issue. So no, I like that one. I like that one.
I remember, Gail, when I first heard it, I had the same reaction. I was like, somebody was, you know, we're talking the other thing, and it was quite a serious thing, and we've got these wee pops. I'm thinking, what? Right, okay, let's get these acronyms. What does that mean? Right, okay. But yeah.
I think what's improved things no end these days is you actually normally get your phone with you. So if you don't know an acronym, you can Google it.
Absolutely.
Doesn't it always give you the answer you need, but on the whole it does. It does. And then lastly from me, we're going to give you a magic wand to cure something in the waste sector. What would you like to use it for?
I would use my magic wand to change people's behaviour in terms of waste attitude and behaviour. Because feeding back to absolutely everything I've said around food waste, around, you know, recycling, segregation, all of these kind of things, I think we probably haven't communicated as best as we could with the sector. I think there's a lot of people, sorry, not the sector, with the public, should I say. I think there's a lot of people in the public that want to do the right thing, but they don't know how to. And I think that with extended producer responsibility and the packaging reforms, it's confusing. I must admit, I get something sometimes and I think, oh my goodness, what do I do with that? And if we're working in the sector and we don't know, how do we expect people that are not in the sector? So I think there's a bit around sort of communication, education, and then behaviourism of the public and us in the sector as well.
Absolutely. We were talking earlier about the litter strategy, the Scottish Government litter strategy, and the one that gets me is, you know, we talk about educating the public not to drop litter. It's like, why would you want to drop litter? It's just like, why should we have to educate people not to do that? It should be it should be a given. But there we go. Okay, good. That was we'll add that to our list. We are going to go back through these at the end of the year and see how many have come to fruition.
Okay.
I think yours, Gail, could be a while.
It could be a slow burner.
It could be a very slow burner, a challenge.
It's baby steps,
Yeah.
baby
Absolutely.
steps. Yes. And so the final question here is, what advice have you got for anyone wanting to follow a similar career path and, into the sort of waste management side of it like you're into, and where would they get started and where to look? What, not just, what you're doing, but how would you get into the waste industry nowadays? What would your advice be, apart from obviously joining CIWM?
Absolutely, that's the first step. I think getting into the waste industry, I speak to a lot of students, and it's not really something that they necessarily aspire to do, but when they find out more about it, so there's lots of different routes. It's quite a general question because there's lots of different routes into the waste sector depending on which area that you want to work within. I think the best piece of advice I would say is from sort of leaving school and starting, whether it be a modern apprenticeship or whether that be going down the university route, is to join an organisation like CIWM to get the contacts to actually take advice and take advantage of the free opportunities of free webinars, to dip your toe in the water and actually see what area it is that you want. And that networking, you can't undervalue the networking. But one big take point I would give to anyone is find a mentor. I had a mentor when I went through my chartership, and I wouldn't have done it, in all honesty, if I hadn't had the support and that sort of push to go along. And they can help you navigate an area that you might not know is even there. It might be a job that you don't even know exists. Having a mentor and organisations like CIWM can offer that to our members, and just find your feet and get as much support as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's just really, really good advice. It's getting that networking, and it's who you know that can help or can advise or give you the sort of the first sort of step up or whatever. It's using people. That's not what I meant. It's being able to understand the industry from other people's perspective as well.
Yeah. Because there's lots of jobs out there that we don't even know exist, or is that a thing? So, and that's where you start to learn and just sort of explore what the opportunities are.
So there we go, Gail. I think we've exhausted our list of questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to come along and talk to you both today and talk about CIWM and myself.